3,000 years ago, in the space of a single generation, the most advanced civilization the world had ever seen burned to the ground. Empires that had ruled for centuries vanished almost overnight. Cities that had stood for 1,000 years were abandoned and never rebuilt. And then something happened that has haunted historians ever since. People forgot how to write. Entire languages fell silent. A darkness swallowed the ancient world, and it would last for 400 years. Historians call it the Bronze Age collapse. It may be the greatest catastrophe in human history. And to this day, no one is completely sure what caused it. To understand how a world could end, we first have to see how magnificent that world truly was. Around 1200 BC, the Eastern Mediterranean was a dazzling network of superpowers, richer and more connected than anything that had come before. In the south stood Egypt, ancient even then, its pharaohs ruling a kingdom of stone temples and endless golden desert. To the north, the mighty Hittite Empire ruled from a mountain fortress, rivaling Egypt itself. Across the sea, the warrior kings of Mycenaean Greece built palaces behind walls so vast that later Greeks believed only giants could have raised them. And binding them all together was the sea itself. Ships carried copper from Cyprus and tin from lands far to the east, the two metals that, melted together, made bronze, and made this age possible. They carried gold and ivory, wine and grain, and letters between kings who called each other brother. Every palace was the beating heart of its kingdom, a vast machine that gathered grain, stored it, and fed thousands. It was, in a very real sense, the first global economy. But a world this connected carried a hidden danger. Every kingdom now depended on all the others. And that dependence was about to become a fatal weakness. The first signs of trouble were small. A raid here. A burned village there. Merchants who set sail and never returned. Then, on the horizon, came the ships. No one knew where they were from. In the records of the time, they have only one name, the Sea Peoples. They were not one people, but many, moving together, warriors, but also women, children, and ox carts piled with everything they owned. This was not a raid. It was a migration of the desperate. An entire population on the move, looking for a new home, and taking it by force. The Egyptians met them in a great battle and left carvings of it on a temple wall, the only portrait we have of the storm that was coming. Egypt survived. Barely. Its pharaoh wrote that the invaders had come from the sea, and that no land could stand before them. They laid their hands upon the lands, he wrote, and no country could resist their arms. One by one, the great kingdoms to the north were not so lucky. The wave was rolling east across the sea. And in its path lay the wealthy trading kingdom of Ugarit. In Ugarit's final hours, a king sat in his palace and dictated one last, desperate letter. Outside his walls, the city was already burning. His soldiers and his fleet were far away. And the enemy was at the gates. The enemy ships are already here, he wrote. They have set fire to my towns and done terrible things in my country. The letter was never sent. Archaeologists found it 3,000 years later, baked hard in the fire that destroyed the city. Ugarit was never rebuilt. Far to the north, the same fate reached the Hittite capital. But here, the story is stranger. Before the fire came, the people seemed to have taken everything of value, and simply walked away. The mightiest empire in the region did not fall in a single battle. It emptied out, went quiet, and died. Across the sea, the great palaces of Mycenaean Greece burned too. In the palace of Pylos, clay tablets record a kingdom bracing for an attack from the sea, watchers posted along the coast. Those tablets survive for the same terrible reason as the letter from Ugarit. They were baked solid by the flames that ended everything. One after another, the lights of the ancient world went out. And that is where the real mystery begins. Because radars alone cannot explain this. The collapse was too vast, too total, and too fast. So historians went looking for a hidden killer. And buried in mud, tree rings, and ancient pollen, they found one. For decades before the fires, the rains had been failing. A brutal, grinding drought had settled over the entire eastern Mediterranean. Harvest after harvest failed. And in kingdoms built entirely on grain, failed harvests meant famine. In a letter found in the ashes, one king begs another for grain, writing simply, "It is a matter of life or death." Starving people abandoned their fields and their cities. The great grain machine ground to a halt. And as if drought and hunger were not enough, the ground itself began to shake. A cluster of massive earthquakes tore through the region in these same years. Drought. Famine. Earthquakes. Invasion. Any one of these, the ancient world might have survived. But they struck together, and they struck a system with no slack left in it. And here is the cruel twist. The very thing that had made this world so rich, its deep connection, is what killed it. When one kingdom fell, it stopped trading. Its neighbor lost the tin, or the grain, or the market it depended on, and fell in turn. One collapse fed the next, faster and faster, until the entire network came crashing down together. A world of dominoes made of stone. When the fires finally died, an entire age had ended. The palaces were gone. The kings were gone. The trade routes, the archives, the very art of writing, gone. The survivors slipped back into a simpler, harder life, in scattered villages among the bones of a world they could barely remember. It would take 4 centuries for the world to learn to write again. When the light finally returned, it returned changed. Out of the ashes came a new metal, harder and cheaper than bronze, iron, and eventually, a new world, and a people who would become the Greeks. We like to believe our world is permanent. But the Bronze Age was advanced, connected, and utterly certain of itself, too. It never imagined it could fall. And it vanished in a single lifetime. The only question history leaves us is a quiet one. Are we really so different?